My name is Deborah Broussard. I'm the president of the board of the library, and we are so glad to have you here. This is the first of a series we're offering this winter, kind of dealing with global topics. Today's discussion couldn't be any more timely. So we're going to be bringing you a lot more interesting and exciting things. My plug for the library is that you all need to go get a library card. And you need to hang out here some. We've got some great theater going on, art classes, all sorts of stuff. You all know all that. So, but I want to introduce you to Travis. We've known each other now, I guess, maybe about 5 years. Yeah, that sounds about right. Travis is originally a native of Wisconsin, which is weird to me that somebody from Wisconsin wants it in Mexico, of all places. He has degrees from the University of Wisconsin, both in marketing and management. And it was while he was doing a typical junior year abroad program in Guadalajara, I believe, is when he absolutely fell in love with Mexico. Continued on with his studies. He has an executive MBA from the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern. He's told you about Mexico news daily. And with that, Travis, I'm just going to turn it over to you. Thank you.
So let's jump right into it. I kind of covered some of this. Deborah covered a little bit of it. This is us in the house in Sheinbaum, not our house, but a friend's house. And I'll just back up 1 second. A lot of people when we first came here said, "What are you guys doing here? You're so young." I don't feel that young, but they say, "You're so young. What are you doing here?" And we've been coming to San Miguel for over 20 years and seen its change, what I think is an awesome change. Some people complain about it. Many people are saying tourists, prices are going up. But if you think about it from the perspective of, just more cool things to do, more opportunities for locals, I think it's great, the change that's taken place. So when COVID came, my wife and I were already thinking, what we want to do, sort of post-corporate career. COVID came, and we said, now's the time. So in October of 2020, after a few months of basically being in Mexico during the pandemic, we said, now's the time. This is a sign that it's the time to make a change. So we moved here, and then ultimately bought Mexico News Daily. I talked about our mission, so I'll just jump right over that. And I think I mentioned a couple of these numbers, but we now have 56 people on the team who have lived in 20 states of Mexico out of 32. They're currently living in 13 states of Mexico. We have actually now 6 nationalities on our team. And it's pretty cool. Our age range of writers is between 22 and 82. And the average years of writing is 20 years. So it's a cool mix on the team. I did a phone call yesterday, and I'm an American living in Mexico. One of our team members on the call is a Mexican living in Dubai, and another person on the team is a British gentleman living in Cambodia. And that was a Mexico News Daily call. So it's quite cool how, even in San Miguel, they've given, this technology-driven world that we live in, we're able to run a business like this, completely digital from San Miguel and completely with everybody working remote for the most part. So let's talk about Claudia Sheinbaum. I'm going to start, and you can either yell it out or you can just think about it, but when you ask your Mexican friends what they think about Claudia, what do they say? Negative. Corrupt. Positive. Negative. A puppet of AMLO. Okay. Those are the same things I hear as well. And again, I'm just sharing my perspective on this, so don't take it as gospel. But most Mexicans I spoke to before the election thought there was no way a woman could win, right? Ultimately, the final 2 candidates were women, so it's going to be a woman. But early on, many Mexicans said to me, there's no way. There's no way Mexico's ready for a woman president. The other thing that a lot of people say to this date, and it's oftentimes varies by economic status, right? So I, in my job, am fortunate enough to interface with Mexicans across the spectrum, economically and across the country. And It's changing every day, but without a doubt, the vast majority of wealthier Americans, wealthier Mexicans, did not want Claudia to win. Okay, I'm generalizing, not everybody, but by far, the vast majority of the wealthier Mexicans did not want her to win. The vast majority, I would say, sort of middle class and below, wanted her to win. We can get into that a little bit later, but that's a little bit of perspective based on what I see and hear. It is changing, and more people are saying, damn, she might be really good, right? We'll get into that. Okay, so just a little bit of background on Claudia. I did have the opportunity to meet her a few months ago. She came to Guanajuato, to León, and gave a speech to a group of business people. And I didn't even shave that day, so I wasn't expecting to meet her. Right? There were probably 200 people in that room. I thought I was just going to be sitting out there. And the person I went with, who's Mexican, afterwards said, "Well, you got to go talk to her. You're immediate. You got to go talk to her." And he just sort of paraded me up there and said, "Claudia, you need to meet Travis. He runs Mexico Daily, blah, blah, blah." And we just talked for like 5 minutes after her presentation. I mean, yes, I tell my wife, I haven't washed this side of my face yet. But we just talked and chatted. She was quite amazing. There wasn't like a ring of security around her or anything. But let's just run through very quickly a little bit of background to make sure everyone's on the same page here. She's 62 years old, born in Mexico City. Her grandparents are both originally from other countries, right? Lithuania and Bulgaria. She has an undergraduate degree in physics, master's in physics, a PhD in energy engineering. She's authored over 100 articles and 2 books on energy, the environment, sustainable development. She completed her PhD in Berkeley and actually lived in California for 4 years. Right there is a huge difference from her predecessor. Right? AMLO, the previous Mexican president, was quite proud of being a little bit anti-globalization and anti-US. He took a lot of pride in that. We'll talk a little bit about that. She lived in the US for 4 years. One of her children lives in the US right now, permanently. So she, right from the start, has a very different background than her predecessor. So I love it when people say, she's just going to be a puppet of AMLO. I think that's a bit offensive, and it's not really recognizing her experience, which is completely different than AMLO's. She's married. It's her second marriage. She just got married again, maybe 6 months ago. She has a daughter, a stepson. She's a grandmother. She was part of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, so she does have a Nobel Peace Prize. She was the head of government of Mexico City. The head of government is the top position, right? So, it's not governor, it's not mayor, it's called head of government when it's Mexico City. Mexico City is 23 million people, so it's a big job, right? 20% of the country's population is there. She became president, as we all know, October 1st of last year. First woman president in Mexico's history, first Jewish president in Mexico's history. So a lot of firsts, a very impressive resume. No matter where you are in the political spectrum, it would be hard not to respect her background. Okay, these aren't necessarily the prettiest slides. I'm not going to read through them all, but this is just kind of to set things up a little bit more. I think what makes the Claudia Sheinbaum case study so interesting, there's all these people in the world. I don't know if you have read any of these biographies of people like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos. It's really fascinating when you see the person today and then you really understand their whole background and sort of how they get there. And what I think is so fascinating about Claudia is that we have what I think is one of the most interesting case studies in the world that's going to play out right before our eyes over the next few years. And I'll talk about why I think it's such an interesting case study. But obviously, she has the weight of, the Mexican population, but clearly the female population as well. Really, clearly is rooting for her to be very successful. And she has that weight of not only Mexican women, but I would say women across the world. As a leader of of one of the largest countries in the world. Her predecessor, and again, I'm not going to weigh in on, I do a whole other speech on if I think AMLO was good or not for the country. The answer is kind of both. But he left her a lot of messes as well. And most people would have a hard time arguing that some of these things are not messes. He underinvested in clean energy. I'm going to talk about why that's beyond the environmental impact, why economically that's a problem in Mexico. Overinvested in Pemex. The oil company of Mexico, Pemex, is a complete disaster. It has $100 billion in debt. And he just doubled down on that and didn't invest in green energy. Racked up considerable debt. Mexico's debt load, as a percentage is still acceptable, but it did go up quite a bit under AMLO. He invested billions of dollars in trains. We'll talk about that in a minute. And he did not improve the country's security situation. Okay, the whole 6 years, Mexican presidents had a 6-year term. He kept saying, it's going to get better, it's getting better. The numbers do not show that. And I'm not trying to scare anybody, it's just the reality. The security situation nationwide did not improve under AMLO. So let's walk through some of the issues she faces. And we'll start with a couple fun ones. So if you become president in the United States, you don't have to think about where you're going to live, right? It's clear, it's defined. That wasn't the case for Claudia. So the president of Mexico has always lived since 1934 in the building, the White Building, basically the White House of Mexico. It's in a beautiful park. If any of you have been to Mexico City, it's in Chapultepec Park. It's a beautiful building. There's room, there's space to walk and everything. AMLO said it's not close enough to the people of Mexico. So he moved from where the president has lived for 90 years to the National Palace, which is the building here on the right side. Beautiful building, not a residence in any way. I mean, maybe it would be like, saying you're going to move to Mar-a-Lago or something. Maybe it would be like saying, the president from now on is going to live in the Pentagon or something. Just sort of a, again, beautiful building, but not necessarily a great place to live. So imagine she's carrying this legacy from AMLO. She clearly was chosen to be the candidate of the party by AMLO. And the first thing is like, wait, do I really want to live in this place that isn't meant to be lived in? And so, just put yourself in her shoes, because again, everybody's looking at what she does. Is she going to be a puppet of AMLO? Or is she going to go back to more sort of the historical norms of decisions? So again, right away, she had a decision to make. She did not choose C. She does not live near Parque Juarez in Mexico City. She actually decided to stay in the National Palace. So it was cool. We ran an article. We run articles on basically everything you're going to see in this presentation. She completely remodeled, a room there. It's literally, she just lives in a room in there. And she did a really cool, she said, she actually did some videos on it. I gave it a woman's touch. And, because historically all the pictures were, male presidents, male congressmen, male military leaders. And the first thing she did was put a bunch of women pictures as well. So she did some cool stuff. But she decided to live in the same location as the previous president, which again, is kind of a strange decision if you ever go look at that building. I mean, it's the other analogy I give is sort of like living in Times Square. A million people there. It's really sort of a strange place to live. The second kind of humorous thing is, as part of the president of the people, AMLO actually sold the presidential airplane. He started by, and this is a true story, he started by saying he was going to raffle it off and sell raffle tickets and use the proceeds to help the poor. Not many people bought, raffle tickets to buy an airplane. And so ultimately he found a buyer in Tajikistan. So the Mexican, Air Force One no longer exists. It is the official airplane of the president of Tajikistan. So again, Amo didn't really care because he took extreme pride in never leaving the country. So he didn't really need it, right? I mean, local flights, whatever. Claudia started, and a couple of weeks later was the G20 meeting in Brazil. So again, put yourself in her perspective, in her shoes. What do? Do you ask Tajikistan to loan it back to you and try to buy one quickly? Do you learn to love the local airlines? Get a NetJets account. What she did actually is fascinating and shocking. She flew commercial airlines to Brazil, and she actually flew economy class. And again, we have articles, we have pictures of her. She boarded in the normal terminal, stood in line with everybody else, boarded the plane, flew economy class. I don't know if that's a great decision or a crazy decision or a genius marketing decision, but that's what she did on her first international trip. Pretty incredible if you think about it. Okay. So she started October 1st, and obviously the US election was coming up fast, right? So obviously she didn't know who's going to win, but both candidates, and especially Mr. Trump, were making a lot of comments about Mexico. And one of them, of course, was the threat of tariffs. And literally I could be updating these slides every couple hours because the news is happening in real time. But during the campaign and leading up into the election, he was saying, they won 25% tariff on Mexico, right? That didn't actually happen because we're at day 3 now. But he was saying it, and he's still, saying different versions of that. So again, put yourself in her shoes. Do you just ignore it and just say it's ridiculous? Do you respond with logic, kind of demonstrating how interconnected our economies are and how they say a vehicle actually crosses the border like 11 times because of the interconnectivity of the supply chain? Or do you just, publicly say it's stupid and ridiculous and you're going to ignore it? Right? She had to make that decision. How are you going to respond to, what's kind of ridiculous, right? The idea of putting a tariff on Mexico like this. So, again, we write about it every day. We had a really cool setup yesterday of sort of the first 5 executive orders that Trump made that had to do with Mexico, and then how she responded to each individual one. With this one, basically so far, her and her team have been doing option B. Really doing, I think, an incredible job educating with facts, with logic, with numbers, how interconnected economies are, and how much it would hurt both economies to do something like this. Okay, it's not just Trump. Are there any Canadians in the room? Okay, excellent. Even Canadians, which are supposed to be so friendly and so nice and so sweet, 2 of the province leaders in Canada right away said, well, maybe we should cut Mexico out of the free trade agreement, right? Because we all know Trump started calling, Governor Trudeau started referring to Canada as the 51st state. Canada had to say, are we going to sort of pick the U.S. side or pick the Mexico side? Several of the leaders of the provinces were very vocal saying, cut out Mexico. Okay? Trudeau came in shortly after and said, we're not in favor of that. But as we all know, Trudeau is going to be gone soon. So you have, Claudia has 2 neighbors, right? 2 partners in the free trade agreement. Trump, and then Canada with a to-be-determined candidate, right? And I don't follow Canadian politics very closely, but, the word on the street is it will be a candidate far more to the right than Trudeau was, right? Much more Trump-like than Trudeau. So again, same thing. I think option D maybe would have been a good one. No offense to our Canadian friends in the room. You know, say, okay, no problem, cut us out the free trade agreement, but enjoy winter. You know, Mexico's closed. Again here, Claudia has been basically, doing this option B. And you really see, and that's why I started with her background, right? PhD, scientist, written books. She's choosing a path of not responding with bluster, but really facts, data, common sense. And so far, it seems to be working and seems to be winning in a work sort of way the respect of Trump and others. Okay, this is This is an interesting one. You don't see that many Chinese vehicles in San Miguel, but if you go to Mexico City, you see them everywhere, literally everywhere. Odds are, if you take an Uber in Mexico City, odds are probably 50-50 that it will be a Chinese vehicle. So again, Mexico, is a huge automobile producer. Over 4 million automobiles are produced in Mexico each year. It's by far the largest driver of the economy. Multiple Chinese car companies have expressed interest in making massive investments into Mexico. BYD is the most well-known Chinese car company. They are fabulous cars. They're affordable. They're electric. They're just beautiful cars. And they're very low priced. And they have been talking about putting a plant in Guanajuato somewhere. They've been offering, up tens of thousands of jobs. Automotive plants always have a minimum of 5,000 jobs, so these are major investments. And in addition, on average, over 10,000 Chinese cars come into Mexico every year. Made in China cars. And an interesting thing is you say made in China cars. The biggest supplier of made in China cars to Mexico is General Motors. Kind of interesting. General Motors sales in China have cratered, so they have all this capacity, so they've been sending them to Mexico. The U.S., of course, has been making a lot of noise about Chinese vehicles coming into the United States. Right? They basically put up tariffs, and basically no politician in the U.S. would, throw up a welcome mat for Chinese car companies to build a plant. And so the U.S. has started pressuring Mexico, saying, you guys can't do this either, because they're saying it's a backdoor. If it's not the complete car, auto parts suppliers, backdoor into the U.S. So again, imagine you're Claudia leading a still very much developing country, needing investment, needing affordable cars, needing green cars, and you have the United States and Canada saying, no way in hell we're going to let you do that. What do? Right? That is a tough decision. So this one is, to be determined. What has happened just in the last few weeks, and it's very, and I'm not being political when I say these things, it's very easy to criticize Trump, but when you look at, does it make sense for a bunch of Chinese vehicles and or Chinese investments to come into Mexico? It's probably not a very good thing for Mexico. Other countries where China has done that, they have primarily brought their own suppliers with them, or they basically only assemble the car locally with all Chinese-made components. In many cases, and this is shocking, actually, they actually bring Chinese labor to do the work. I write an article every Saturday in Mexico News Daily where I kind of connect the dots on some of the things going on. And I had one last weekend where I was talking to one of the leading immigration service companies in Mexico. And they said they had recently gotten a request for help with permanent residencies for 1,000 Chinese. 1,000. So an agency contacted them and said, can you help us get residency for 1,000 Chinese? Now, I don't think those 1,000 were just interested in vacationing in San Miguel. I would bet that was linked to a Chinese car company wanting to get prepared, and saying, okay, managers, middle managers, even below, it's going to be Chinese employees. So, very tough decision. right? Especially if Guanajuato, which of course has a lot of poor areas, Guanajuato, which of course has violence issues, is being told from BYD, we'll create 10,000 jobs. We'll invest $3 billion. You want us? Right? Very difficult, very, very difficult decision she's facing. And this is something to keep an eye on for sure. Another one, violence. The previous president took a very, Mexican presidents have taken different paths on cartels. Everything from let's get proactive and try to, stop them, which didn't work, and actually resulted in a ton of violence. The previous president, AMLO, took a strategy he actually called it hugs, not bullets. And the idea being, if you hug them, potentially there won't be bullets. That didn't work either. Not at all. And so, there's some good books on this. I'm reading a book right now on 100 years of U.S. government intervention in the drug war in Mexico. It's fascinating. But clearly, we've all heard it. The United States, Trump has been saying, if you don't fix this problem, we're going to. Right? We've all heard those threats. So, again, imagine you're Claudia. Your predecessor's strategy didn't work. The predecessor before that one did something different, and that didn't work. And now you have Donald Trump saying, if you don't stop this, we'll either put up tariffs, or we're going to bring in, special forces from the United States, or drones, or whatever. What do you do? Right? Very, very complicated questions. And, my thoughts on this are, if it were that easy to stop the cartels, it would have been done, right? And another thing, when people always blame Mexico, and we write a lot about this as well, when people blame Mexico, it takes two, right? I mean, the production is here, or the mixing is here. That's horrible. It's inexcusable. But the majority of the consumption is in the United States. The vast majority of the guns causing the killing in Mexico come from the United States. So it's not that easy just to say, Claudia, you either fix the problem or we're going to do it. Right? It's not that simple. So, again, she's smart, but it's not easy to solve a problem like this. So it's happening in real time. The government has taken some steps. I had an article 2 days ago. 2 major fentanyl labs were shut down 2 nights ago. So the government is taking action in a way that we didn't see during the AMLO presidency. Obviously, but there have been some very visible actions taken by the Mexican military to start to make an effort at this problem. Just a couple more, and then we'll do questions. Migration. Okay, the numbers during the Biden administration were that 9 million migrants, immigrants came into the United States. Okay, by any historical measure, that's a huge number. Right? A huge number, clearly much more than normal, came into the country. Trump has obviously made a lot of strong statements, threats, linking it to tariffs, linking it to aid, and whatever, that Mexico needs to take action to stop migrants. Historically, Mexico, for the most part, has basically just let the migrants from Central America, from Venezuela primarily, but also Haiti, also Colombia, just come right through Mexico. Basically knowing they weren't going to stop in Mexico, although there are more and more of those types of migrants living in Mexico. You see it in Mexico City in particular. But Mexico's historical position on this was, you're not stopping here, so just, keep moving, work your way through. Trump's making it very clear that that's not acceptable anymore. And there are some decent arguments to that, right? What's easier to police? The couple 100-mile border of Mexico and Central America, or the couple 1,000-mile border of Mexico and the United States? Arguably, if you do see this as something that needs to be controlled a little more, it might be more logical to try to do it, at the southern Mexican border. Mexico has, again, in very short order, has started to stop some migrant trains coming from Central America and Venezuela. Claudia's government, again, just in the last few weeks, has stopped several thousand person groups of migrants coming from Central and South America. That's probably an easier one for Mexico to give the United States a win if you're thinking about it as a negotiation or a deal, which clearly the Trump administration is looking for that. Trains. I'm sure you all love trains. I love trains. The previous president really loved trains. Actually, there's been two, if you just put aside if it makes economic sense in the short term, put that aside for a minute. What was done in trains in the AMLO administration was absolutely incredible. And really at the par of sort of what China has done in infrastructure. In a 6-year period, there were two major train projects completed. One was the Maya train, 1,600 kilometers, 1,000-mile train network going, Cancun, Playa del Carmen, Tulum, Palenque, Merida, all throughout the Mayan area, the Yucatan Peninsula, completely built out in 3.5 years. A 1,000-mile train network. I was in Tulum a couple days ago. I went to the Tulum train station. It looks like an airport. I mean, it's this beautiful facility. It's really impressive. There was no one there. That's another story. But this train network was built, and it was hugely controversial. A lot of people said it was going to, destroy the jungle, ruin, cenotes, the underground water network there. I'm very much an environmentalist person, but if you go there and you see it and you understand the extreme poverty in that part of Mexico and what potentially a train network like this could do to bring jobs, opportunity, tourists to those areas, I think there's some pretty strong arguments for it. The problem is it cost, the estimates were $6 billion and it cost $16 billion. So as I said to one of my colleagues this morning, the middle school I went to here in Central, I went afterwards to the bathroom and it said, hygiene is culture. In the bathroom, no soap, no toilet paper, no toilet seat. And, it's one of those strange things where you say, so there was $16 billion to build this train, which is important. But there's still not things like toilet paper in middle school in a city. And so, again, that's sort of the context for Claudia now saying, okay, it's built, but the maintenance and operational costs of something like this. The other incredible train is it's called the Trans-Peninsular Train. And basically, it's a train from the Pacific coast in the skinniest part of Mexico to the Gulf of Mexico. And the concept was, and it goes back 100 years, Mexico was considering, before the Panama Canal, Mexico was going to build this train that would allow cargo to go across, and then the U.S., for all the reasons we know, got serious about, we need to do the Panama Canal, we need to build this thing, and it ultimately, eclipsed this Mexican idea. It's now been built. And the idea, it's sort of Mexico's alternative to the Panama Canal. That being said, it can't handle nearly the capacity of the Panama Canal. But the idea is that A ship comes from Asia, pulls up, and the freight unloads directly onto a train, 6 hours across the country, directly loads onto another ship, and it's on its way. So not everything makes sense to do that way, but a lot of freight may make sense to do that. And what's interesting is it actually is being used and justified to create more investment in the state of Oaxaca, which is also an exceptionally poor, historically always dirt poor area. So there's more and more investment coming because there's logistics, they're starting to build. And we can snicker at this, but when you don't have a job, any job is better. And so, industrial parks, logistics parks, things that would support this trans-peninsula train. It's up and running. It also has tourist trains on it. But getting back to Claudia, these things have major debt associated with them. They're going to have major costs going forward. And so she had to quickly make some decisions. What are you going to do? Many Mexicans would say these are absolute white elephants. They're a joke. They're never going to be successful. But they also said it would never be built. And it was built in record time. But she has to decide, what are you going to do? And actually, what she's done early on here is option C. So she's already announced a train that will be built from Mexico City to Querétaro. If you've ever driven that, it's basically like crazy amount of semi. It's like driving from Chicago to Gary, Indiana or something. It's like not fun. And so she's saying within a couple of years, that train will be done. And then there's going to be a train from Mexico City up through Guanajuato, over to Guadalajara, and then up to the border, ultimately. So Mexico is doubling down on trains. Now, again, you could say, U.S. perspective, that's crazy, it'll never work. Basically, the rest of the world's perspective on trains has been, it's part of, it's got to be part of the solution, right? It can't just be sealed. And if you've ever driven on some of these highways heading north, it's insane how many semis there are. And so obviously, the more of that on trains, the better. Okay. Yes. The Mayan train is a mix. In some stretches, it's electric. Some it's natural gas. I think the next city one would be electric. Again, the previous ones, because they were under envelope, he wasn't totally prioritizing, electrification on them. Just two more, and then we'll get to questions. Pemex, I talked to briefly. The issue with Pemex isn't that it's inefficient, it has horrible debt. I personally, when I'm driving, I'd rather go to a non-Pemex gas station than a Pemex one. I think the service is better. But at the end of the day, the real issue, if you talk to any business leader that wants to invest in Mexico, they need to have a certain percentage of their energy created with green energy, right? If you're General Motors, if you're Kraft, if you're PepsiCo, if you're Honda, you have told your shareholders that 25% of all the energy we consume will be green energy, and by the year 2030, it'll be 50%. They've made promises. And so if Mexico doesn't have their act together on generation of clean energy, literally, that is one of the biggest barriers that most business people talk about, limiting their ability to invest more in Mexico. AMLO, literally, and I've talked to many ambassadors, many business leaders in Mexico, they all say when they shared that concern with him, he didn't care one bit. Just didn't care. Claudia, everything would indicate she very much will prioritize this. In Mexico, you cannot install solar on your roof and sell it back to the grid, right? So maybe in your house, you say, okay, who cares? It's still to my house. But if you're a big company, you want that flexibility. I've talked to a lot of business leaders. It's actually quite common in Mexico. If you're in an industrial park, you say, okay, I'm going to build a plant here. Can I get electricity? And the answer is usually no, right? I mean, it's at the limit right now. And that's a problem in the United States as well, with data centers and all those demands. They say, okay, can I build my own power generation plant? You can't get the permits. Can I build a solar park? Can't get the permits. So I can't state enough how, Mexico has shot itself in the foot by not just allowing green energy investments to come in. So again, Amu didn't do that at all. Given her background, and she has indicated, and I've heard some rumors of some legislation that will be coming out very soon that will be much more green energy friendly. Last one. Deportation. Right? Deportation is something that sort of seemed unfathomable a few weeks ago or a few months ago, and it increasingly is feeling like it could become reality. There's an estimated 4 million Mexicans. There's many more of other ethnic ethnicities, but 4 million, illegal, if you want to put that in parentheses, or undocumented Mexican immigrants in the United States. We've all heard what Trump has said. Again, you're Claudia Sheinbaum. What do? Right? Do you take that threat seriously? Do you prepare? How would you prepare? Do you think it's just ultimately a negotiating tool? If you think of all the things she has to deal with, she's going to have to give on some of them, right? And so specifically with this one, we had an article yesterday on it. Mexico has just started building 12 camps along the border to receive people deported from the United States. How will that play out? No one knows, right? But Claudia just announced last week a plan called basically, we're going to hug you. If you're deported, it's obviously incredibly traumatic for the person, for the family. And she's launched this program called, I'm doing a bad translation, but we're going to hug you when you get here. Announcing like meal vouchers and a little mini preloaded credit card and things like that. But I mean, let's be honest. I mean, Mexico has, extremely limited capacity if larger numbers of people start coming back. So that of course, it could be an opportunity. Skilled people coming back, creating jobs, reconnecting with their families. But I mean, it's sort of unknown, right? I mean, we haven't seen something like this play out, and so she is, she's preparing. Every bit of evidence we see is she's preparing for potential significant deportation. Yeah, those would be for Mexican. There's also, well, what about the non-Mexican ones? And she's suggested Mexico is willing to receive them because some countries are just saying, we're not going to let the plane land, right? I mean, Venezuela has been by far the largest sender of immigrants over the last few years, and their president said, no plane with people being deported can land here. So then what? Right? I mean, this is a super complicated issue, especially for Mexico. They're kind of caught in between. So I'll just end with this. She has a damn tough job. I think that's clear. It's I'm all for reading, historical perspectives on people, but I really, really, really encourage you to follow this one. The news isn't all bad. It isn't all depressing, right? I talk to so many people that just say, I'm tuning out. I can't stand it for my own mental health. I'm tuning out. And I just biased because I own a digital newspaper. But don't tune out on this. I mean, this is the real world, and there's a lot of, and it's not, I promise you, if you follow what's going on here, it's not just like, oh my God, I can't believe this. It's not every day wanting to, shoot yourself. It's actually really, complicated issues, complex issues. Someone who has the weight of the world on her shoulders trying to figure this out. And so far, 110 days in, I would argue, doing a hell of a job. instead of just a honeymoon in the first 100 days of flying to every state in Mexico, she's had to deal with all this. So I would encourage you, before I open it up to questions, don't say, I don't want to watch the news. Stay informed, stay positive, stay educated, and help educate others on this, right? Because I have neighbors here in San Miguel that say, well, Claudia better start listening to Trump or she's going to get in trouble, things like that. And I said, wait a minute, are you really understanding the scale of issues she's dealing with? And so helping educate, so I bombard him with articles. Educate others, because there is an incredible amount of ignorance on a lot of these topics out there. And I see it, and again, that was a big motivator for wanting to buy Mexican News Daily. I hate what the media has done to our country, the United States. I hate what it's done to states, to communities, to school districts, families, and it just doesn't help to stick your head in the sand. I mean, that's not going to solve any problem. And so, getting educated, getting informed, helping others understand, and if anything, sometimes it's very hard. I mean, I have people in my family that I cannot talk any politics with because it's so emotional. But a bridge of discussion can be talking about, like, Mexico, right? Like, what about Mexico's dilemma with the United States on this? And it does provide a little bit of, I think, common ground to have a discussion. Okay? So,